Chef Jay here. Want to start covering how to prepare a fantastic Thanksgiving dinner. And it's really pretty simple. You do have to plan a little bit in advance though. The biggest thing you need to worry about is your brine. Okay, brining a bird makes a big difference in not only the flavor of it, but how moist and tender it is when you finally pull it out of the oven. So whether you decide to smoke it, fry it, cook it in the oven traditionally, traditional style, you should brine your bird. Now, I'm a fan of a honey brine. It adds a little bit of sweetness to the bird. In fact, I've had a lot of people say that it ends up, especially when it comes off the smoker, it ends up tasting quite a bit like ham and a lot less like turkey. So it adds a lot of flavor to it. And this is just kind of a basic brine for you. If you don't want to add the honey, totally fine. You can use sugar or you can omit the sweetness altogether. Really the point is to get some sodium content into the tissues of the bird. That way as it roasts, it holds on to the moisture. You'll end up with a much more tender, moist, juicy turkey when you're done. So the basic brine, okay, this will handle anywhere between about a 12 and a 20 pound bird, okay, for the amount that we're making. So we've got 2 quarts of chicken stock. You can use vegetable stock as well if you like. We've got a quart of water, a cup of salt, and a pound of honey. Now, if you don't have the means to weigh that out, it's about I would say a cup and a half, a cup and 3/4. But if you can weigh it out, a pound is kind of what you're going for. If you're buying it in the store, you can typically buy it by the pound as well. If you look on the little bear, he weighs about a pound. So that's what we're going to start with. So we're going to set a pan over about a medium-high heat. We're going to add the 1 quart of water and the 1 cup of salt. And we'll let that come to a boil. Really the goal here is just to dissolve the salt. Okay, so we'll just let that kind of come up to a boil. Once that salt is dissolved and this is all nice and clear, then we'll add the honey and the chicken stock and we'll start cooling it off. So let's go ahead and bring that up to a boil. As you can see, we're almost at a boil here and that salt is pretty much dissolved. So at this point we're going to go ahead and turn the heat off. We're going to add our stock to it. That was 2 quarts of our stock, and then we're going to add our 1 pound of honey. We'll just stir that together. Now when you taste this, it's going to taste fairly salty and just only slightly sweet. The sweet just kind of helps offset the saltiness to it. So it's not like you're going to end up with like a really sweet turkey or anything like that. This is just adds a nice little depth of flavor to it. So mix that together. And then as soon as that's dissolved, we're going to go ahead and cool it off. I recommend giving it at least 2 to 4 hours to cool off in the refrigerator. If you don't have that much time, we're going to be adding a fair amount of water to this as well once we put the turkey in it. So you can just add ice directly to this. But I'm going to show you how I do it. So we'll go ahead and cool this off for a couple hours. And then we'll get that turkey in the brine. All right, so we've got our brine that's now cooled off. We've got a cooler that we're going to actually brine the turkey in. Now, don't stress too much about the cooler. I have a cooler that I do use that's particular for turkeys and brining and things like that. But any cooler will do as long as you sanitize it afterwards. And the best way to sanitize it is wash it out thoroughly with some warm soapy water, and then get some, basically a gallon of water and a tablespoon of bleach. And wipe that down. That'll completely sanitize it, and then you can go back to using it for whatever you use it for, sodas or beer or whatever. So let's start with our turkey before we get this in the brine. Okay, when you get your turkey, you've got 2 things to consider. Number 1, inside this cavity, you've got the neck. So we're going to pull the neck out. So we don't necessarily want to brine that. Okay, so we'll take the neck and pull it out. And then over here, there's a flap of skin. And you're just going to pull that flap of skin back. And then there's a bag of all the innards, the heart and the kidneys and liver and stuff like that. Actually, I don't know if they put the kidneys in there. Anyway, the innards. So you're going to take your turkey. And you're going to go, I'm going to set it breast side down into the cooler. And then we'll add our brine. Now you notice that doesn't fill it up, okay? There's still a fair amount of room in there. So what we want to do, we're actually going to add some water to this, or you can add ice, okay, depending on how long you're going to brine your turkey for. 24 hours is fine. This turkey is just barely thawed out, and so 24 hours in a cooler with a cold brine is going to be totally fine. So we're going to add another 4 quarts of water. So there's 2 quarts. And there's 4 quarts. Okay, so you can see now with a gallon of water in there, in addition to the brine, we've got plenty of liquid in there with the breast side down. So we're going to give this 12 hours with the breast side down, and then we'll flip it, give it another 12 hours so you get a nice even brine all throughout. Now our turkey's been brining for about 24 hours now, so what we're going to want to do is pull it out, and you've got a couple different ways you can cook it. But before you get to cooking, one thing you always want to be careful of, and I should have mentioned this earlier, is you want to make sure your surfaces, all your work surfaces stay sanitary. If you get one little splash of juice, that's a contaminated surface. Okay, so as you're splashing things around, and you're probably gonna get a few drops here and there, what I like to do is have just a little bucket with a couple drops of bleach and some nice hot water in it. That helps sanitize surfaces. So keep some bleach water and a towel handy to wipe up after yourself, and wash your hands frequently when handling the turkey so you don't cross-contaminate stuffing or anything like that. Just be mindful of that. So we're going to go ahead and pull our turkey out of the brine, and as you lift it up, there's 2 cavities, and you want to make sure you get all the juice out of both of them. Okay, so here's our turkey. A couple things we want to do. Now the legs are already secured right here. That's great. We want to keep them in nice and tight to the body. I don't ever cook my turkey with stuffing inside. That slows the cooking down. A lot of people will tell you, oh, it helps keep the turkey moist. There's varying opinions on that. I don't cook anything with anything inside just so that it cooks a lot more evenly. What I do is, you can see you've got 3 separate wing sections here. I always take this and tuck it under the leg so that it's in tight and close to the body. Okay, and I do that on both sides. That way it keeps those wings in nice and tight to the body, and they're not gonna, if they're flailing out here, they're gonna burn. They're gonna cook way quicker than anything else. So just tuck that under the wing, or excuse me, under the leg, just like that. Okay, that's gonna keep everything nice and tight together. Now, 2 different ways to cook this that I'm gonna recommend to you. Number 1 is roasting. Okay, if you want to oven roast this, that's great. What you're gonna do is you're going to crank your oven up to 500 degrees. Now you're going to want to put it in a roasting pan. This is just a sheet tray that I've got it set on because I'm actually going to do something different with mine that I'll tell you about in a moment. But if you're roasting this in the oven, you're going to want a pan that's got about a 2-inch depth in it, okay? Because you're going to have some juices. You'll use that to make gravy later. But as far as roasting the turkey goes, crank your oven up to 500, stick it in there for 30 minutes. At the end of 30 minutes, you're going to drop it down to 325. You're going to cook it at 325 for about another 2.5 hours. Once you get to about the 1.5 hour mark, start testing the temp. And you're going to take a thermometer, and you see like the big old meaty part of the breast right here. You're going to stick the thermometer right in there and temp it. That's the thickest part of the meat. That's where it's going to take the longest to cook. So stick a thermometer right in there, temp it. You're looking for a temperature of 160 degrees. Now that's 5 degrees cooler than what what the Board of Health says you should cook it to. But as you pull it out, as it sits and rests, it's going to come up another 5 to 10 degrees. So you hit that magic 165 where it's completely safe to eat. By pulling that at 160 degrees, you're going to end up with a much juicier, more tender turkey than, a lot of people worry about, oh, it's not done enough. If it's 160 degrees, don't overcook it. Pull it out at 160, cover it with some foil, just loosely, just like tent style, and let it rest for about 15 to 20 minutes before you start carving it. If you're going to smoke it, that's what I'm actually going to do with mine. I'm going to put mine on the smoker for about 2.5 hours. It'll just sit out there on a nice low smoke. And again, I'll temp it. 160 degrees is the magic temperature that I'm looking for. Once it gets to 160, I'll pull it off the smoker, cover it in foil, let it rest for about 15 to 20 minutes before I start carving. And then that's when you have like that awesome, tender, juicy, flavorful turkey. And the brine is also going to help keep that meat nice and juicy and flavorful. All right, this is what your bird looks like after about 2.5 hours in the oven or a couple hours on the smoker. This one was actually smoked. It's beautiful. Now the last thing that remains is to carve the turkey up. A lot of people like to do this at the table. My recommendation is do not carve the bird at the table. Okay. Reason for that being, carving it at the table can be a messy affair, and you don't actually end up getting a whole lot of meat off of it, because typically people will take and just start slicing down the breast like this. You're going to lose a lot of meat that way. So I'm going to show you a quick, easy way to get the maximum amount of meat off this bird and to carve it really, really simply. So first things first, we're going to take these little wing sections here and just break those off. Those will go into a bowl. We'll make that into stock later. So we'll break both of those off. Now, the breasts are going to be the last thing that we pull off. First thing we're going to pull off are the legs. Now you can see the connective tissue right here. Okay, so what we're going to do is just kind of cut right along there. And you can see how that just, look how beautiful that meat is in there. And you're going to cut all the way down in there. And we're going to do that on both sides. Okay, so the legs kind of come away. Now we've got this little piece of skin here that's, they've been tucked into to hold them together. Just slice through that. And then what we'll do is, again, same thing, connective tissue right here. We want the whole drumstick to come off as a whole. So we'll just come right down in here, cut in a little bit right there, start popping that open, and then as this pops open, just get your knife right down in there. Okay, until you get down to the joint. You're just going to kind of find where that joint is and get your knife in there. Sometimes it can take a little bit of doing. There we go. And it just pops right out. There it is. And we'll cut around the back side of that. And there is drumstick number 1. So we'll set that aside. All right, so wing number 2. Again, we're just going to kind of cut right through that connective tissue right there. Do the same thing on this side. I know it's kind of hard to see in there. Now, you may be noticing that the meat is a little bit pink. The reason for that being is I smoked this bird, okay? As with all poultry, you're not necessarily looking at what color it is. What you're looking for is that it's not clear. If it's clear, that means it's not cooked all the way through. But you can see these juices right here, how those are running clear. That means it's cooked all the way through. Yeah, I'm just going to turn this over towards me so I can see this. But really it's just, again, finding that joint, popping it, and then getting the knife in there. Okay, so there's drumstick number 2. So now we have 2 drumsticks. We'll set those aside just for a minute. Here's the thing. With the dark meat, it's really hard to make the dark meat look pretty. So be okay just, pulling little chunks off and setting those on the platter. We'll put the dark meat down first, and we'll put everything else on top of that. So all these little pieces of meat that are still sticking off of here, don't worry. And we're going to turn this over so we can get to the wing sections, okay? Lots of good dark meat here. Again, you can see the connective tissue right here, just where the skin is. You're just going to run your knife right along there. Just cut right into that. And then again, the same thing. You just want to kind of pop that joint. And then once that joint is popped, you'll just run your knife right through there. Okay, and that's your thigh section. Do the same thing on the other side. Just run that knife right along there. Pop that joint. Cut in there. There's our other thigh section. Okay. Now we'll get into our wings before we get to the last little part here. Now this is a lot of good meat here. We're just going to take it off all in one section. Again, you can see the connective tissue here. We're just going to run the knife right along there. Now this is, you want to be a little bit careful here because we're getting into the breast. Okay, so you can see right here. So we'll just run the knife right through here. so that that's not going to mar or tear our breast as we start popping that joint. So we'll pop that joint, and then you can see you just put your knife right in there, cuts through those tendons, and there's a wing section. Do the same thing over here. We'll just cut right along here, so we have a nice, beautiful breast section. We'll come underneath, cut through that connective tissue as well. Pop that joint, and then just run the knife through there to take it off. So there's our wing section. Now we'll get to taking the meat off of those in just a minute. Okay, so what we've got here is basically our breast sections. Okay, and we've still got a little bit of dark meat underneath here as well. Now the easiest way to get to this dark meat is really just with your finger. Just kind of running it right along the bone, pulling that dark meat off. Again, there's really no pretty way to do this. So just pull it off and start getting some of that on the platter. Just getting as much meat off as you can. Now any meat that's left on this carcass is going to be totally fine. We'll end up using it for stock. We'll simmer the whole carcass along with some mirepoix and make a really, really nice stock with that. And getting over here, all that dark meat. We'll just get those pieces off. There we go. All right, so we'll take this carcass and we'll set this aside just for a minute. So we're going to come over to our thighs. Now our thighs, there's just one bone in that. Okay, so the easiest way to do this is to just run your knife right along the bone. And then you can get your fingers in there and run that up to the top. And just kind of pull that bone right out. Now you see a lot of connective tissue in this little piece of bone here. We're going to just cut right through that. Throw that bone in for the stock. So now we've got this nice piece of thigh meat. I'm actually going to take the skin off of this part. And then the thigh, we got some fat on there too. We'll put that in the stock pot. Now the thigh, we can slice up. Okay, we'll put that dark meat right on the plate as well. Again, this is all going to be covered up with the final plating, so don't worry about that too much. We'll do the same thing with this other thigh. So we got the bone there. Run the knife right along the bone. Get your fingers in there. What you want to do is just kind of reach underneath that bone like that, and then run your fingers up to the top to disconnect it, and then run them down to the bottom. Pull that out, cut off the connective tissue, and then throw that into the pot for stock. And then we'll turn that thigh over. We'll slice it, and you can see the grain of the meat here. What we're, the striations in the tissue there, we're actually cutting across the grain. That's going to give us a more tender piece of meat. If you cut with the grain, you've got these long fibers, and it ends up being really chewy. If you cut across the grain, as with any meat, you're going to end up with shorter fibers, and it's a lot less chewy. So we'll add that to the platter here. All right, now let's come to our wing sections. Now again, wing sections, not really a pretty way to do this. So I'm just going to kind of slice down through here, pop that joint, and then I usually, the skin on this part I get rid of as well. I'll throw that into my stock pot. And then I'll just use my hands to kind of peel off. There's all these different little muscles that come through here. And so I just kind of pull it off by hand. Just getting all that meat onto the platter. When you're done, throw that into the stock pot. And when you get to this section of the wing, this skin has tons of flavor. You can see that nice dark toasty color to it. That's definitely going to want to go into our stock. And there's not as much meat on this, so this is a little more of a challenge to get meat off. But again, just use your fingers and kind of peel it off the bone. And if you get down to like this end where the connective tissue is, it's okay to grab your knife and just kind of cut that off. Set that on there. I know you're looking at this thinking, this does not look like turkey dinner should look. Just wait, it will, I promise. Throw that in the stock pot. We'll do the same thing to this other wing. Just cut right down through there. Pop that joint. And then with the drumstick again, we'll get as much meat off as we can. Getting rid of the skin. And be kind of gentle with the meat. I mean, you don't have to like manhandle this. It should come off fairly easily. These are tasty, tasty bits of chicken, or excuse me, turkey. So we'll throw that in there, and then again, we'll do the same thing with this last little wing section. Saving that skin for the stock. Just getting those fingers in there and kind of peeling that away from the bone. Alright, so there's all of our dark meat. So we get that kind of just arranged in a nice pile right in the middle of the platter. Alright, now let's come back to our breast. Now, on this carcass, there's a bone that runs right here. This is the breastbone. Okay, so what you're going to want to do, and you can kind of feel it there. It's pretty firm, and then you can feel the breasts on either side where it's nice and soft. The way this bone works, it goes down and then it flares out that direction. So we want to kind of cut down. So we'll just kind of start with one cut right off to the side of the breastbone and cut right down in there. And then as it flares out a little bit, I like to get my hands down in there and just kind of see what I'm doing. And we'll just kind of follow that bone down as it flares out. And then once we peel that away, just kind of slice through that. And there is one breast. I've got a little bit of extra meat on here. I didn't quite follow that bone as closely as I wanted to. So I'm going to go ahead and just slice that off. And I'll put that on the plate as well. And we'll leave the rest for the carcass. And then we'll just do the same thing over here. So just right down the breastbone. And then following that flare all the way down. There's our second breast. Now all of this, I'll take that little piece of meat off. Okay, so you can see there's very little meat left on here. Got a little bit of, let's get some of this off. There we go. So we'll take that, put that in our stock bowl, and we'll simmer that and make stock later. As far as the breast goes, all we're going to do now is kind of clean it up a little bit. Cut off some of the excess skin so it's all nice and uniform and just a nice beautiful shape. And then I usually like to start at the fat end. Make sure I've got my platter all set for it. And we're just going to start slicing. Okay, do a nice slice. And I go kind of thick on these, a little more than a 1/4 inch. Just like a nice meaty piece of turkey on my plate. Okay, so we get that breast all sliced up. We're just going to place that right on the platter, just like that. And we're going to do the same thing over here with this one. Again, starting at the fat end. A little thicker than a 1/4 inch each. I took the skin off on that last one. That's a bummer. Alright, take that. Place that on the platter as well. Just kind of rearrange a little bit and line those up. And then I like to put the drumsticks down at this end, just crossed. Clean that platter up just a little bit. And that is ready to serve. That is a beautiful, beautiful piece of turkey right there. Simple as that. Take your time, be patient with it, and don't freak out. I mean, it's just food. You can't really mess it up. And you've got some amazing flavor in that after brining it, smoking it, and or roasting it. It's going to be really, really just have a ton of flavor, very juicy, very tender. Hope you have a great Thanksgiving. Savor the day.